Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. My name is Brian Funk. I'm your host. I make music as AfroDJMac, and this is episode 2. And I'm calling this episode Make Bad Music. Sounds like bad advice, I'm sure, but I think it's actually really good advice. So, one of the things I think we get into trouble with in the creative process is trying to make something great. Trying to make something awesome, right? It's natural. You sit down and make music and you want to come up with something cool. You want it to be interesting and thought-provoking and inspire emotions, all these things that music does for us. And what happens in my case, in a lot of people's case, I think, is you sit down and you start searching for sounds or start fiddling with an instrument, and you're constantly judging things and saying, oh, that's not amazing. That's not quite as awesome as it could be. That's a common chord progression, or that's the same drum kit in this song, or that's the same sampled instrument, whatever. That's the preset I heard here. I can't use presets because that's ordinary. We get all these things in our head and it becomes self-defeating. So I'm going to propose that we go and make bad music. And what I mean by that is not necessarily to purposely make bad music, but don't be afraid of it. Let things that are bad happen. And there's a couple good reasons for this. For one, I think you'll stop judging things. You won't get too critical in the early stages of the creative process. And it's so important that you're not critical in those early stages because your ideas are just little babies. They're infants. You know, would you put an infant on a baseball team and expect them to be as good as the Yankees? I don't think so. That wouldn't be fair. So why would you do that to your music? It's a bad idea and it's going to get you frustrated. So let's try to turn that that critical mind off as best as possible and just start making music. Don't worry if it's bad. Who cares? If nothing else, if you sit down and make a bad song, you have practiced the process of making a song. I'm sure if you would allow me to look inside your hard drive, I bet you have a lot of unfinished ideas. I know I do. I've got probably a billion, countless gigs of unfinished ideas. Things that I started that maybe sounded cool and then I didn't know where to go with it, or things that I started and then I got frustrated and decided it sucked or just didn't want to work on it anymore, or forgot about it. Who knows? But there's a lot of that going on, and we get a lot of practice starting a track. We do that every single time we open a new session. We start a track. But how much practice do you get finishing a track? How much practice? How many times do you finish a track? Think about it. There's probably for many of us, we can count it on our hands, figure out how many songs we finished. That's kind of dangerous because what happens when you come up with that brilliant, great idea that inspires emotion and thought and has a interesting perspective on society and love and whatever, you name it. And now you have to finish that track and you don't really know how to do that because you've only done it like 8 times. That can be a problem because now that wonderful idea is going to get a poor treatment at the end stages, which could be a really important time for your song. So get your practice on whatever you make. Make sure that you are actually coming up with music and finishing it, even if it's bad. You may surprise yourself, is another reason. You may surprise yourself with what you come up with. Sometimes things don't sound great in the beginning, but as we work on it, it gets better, and then it gets better, and we improve it, and we change it. I can't tell you how many times I've been with friends who have come over maybe with their guitar, played something they were working on. Maybe it was on their computer, track they're working on, a beat. Students have done this to me where they've shown me things. And, I hear it and, it doesn't do anything for me. Maybe I even think it's dumb or stupid or boring or rip off of something else. I mean, that happens. I've heard it a lot of times. But one of the most humbling things is when that person comes back with that same thing that I've written off that if I was working on, I would have abandoned. they come back and they've turned it into something beautiful, something interesting, something unique and original. And because I was too stubborn to use those 4 chords because it was the same chords from some other song, I never would have came up with it. I would have abandoned it. And then I'm sort of, left to eat my words, eat my shame in that I would have shut that down because I was too close-minded. So when we make bad music, or when we're not afraid to make bad music, we're willing to allow things through. We're willing to allow ideas to happen, to develop, to grow. It's so important. There's just really no telling where something's going to go until you see it go there. You have to follow it. You have to explore what you're working on. So don't be afraid to make bad music. In fact, sit down today, make some bad music. Laugh at it if you want. It's okay. I mentioned in the first episode about the January contest. Well, I shouldn't say contest. It was just a challenge in which you had to, the contest goes against everything that the January challenge does because it's not a contest. The idea was just create a jam. Every single day, make a jam. Come up with something. Post it. Share it. That's all you had to do. It doesn't have to be great. Don't worry about it. It could just be something you're fiddling on. Well, that gave me so much freedom. And as I said, I only started about halfway through the month, but it gave me such incredible freedom to just make music without worrying about it, by just coming up with something. And just because I had to do something today. And I wanted to try to make my tracks as finished as possible. So I had a really limited amount of time to go through all the steps of the production process. And I didn't do it every single time. Some of the things I did were just little jams. But I tried to finish things. I tried to, make a track that's had some sort of cohesion and some sort of beginning and end. And it took me through those processes. And I might have only got it started a couple times late at night, 10 o'clock at night. And I got to be done by midnight or whatever, or whenever I need to go to bed. And it forced me to go through the process of each step of coming up with an idea, of developing it, embellishing it, changing it, coming up with maybe another idea to complement it, and then figuring out how to organize it all, and finally to polish it up enough to release it. So, what a great exercise. It was sometimes not that great, sometimes not that interesting, sometimes just silly, but it was okay. The point was that I did it, so I could kind of check off my calendar for that day, then move on to the next day. And it was a very limited time. Another experience I sort of had with maybe, I don't want to call it bad music because I think it came out really well, but my buddy Chris and I created a collection of songs called Social Story Songs, which are songs intended for young children that are having trouble with social cues. So if you are familiar with, social norms, which many of us are, simple things like that are very difficult sometimes for children that have certain learning disabilities or conditions such as autism. So the idea of maybe you shouldn't, touch people so much is not easily understandable to them. So we decided to come up with a bunch of songs that we could play and give to teachers to play to their students to help teach these songs in a non-confrontational way. Sometimes a lot of the behaviors that are exhibited that are really not acceptable socially are the product of anxiety and, struggles that they have. And if you directly confront them, say, no, you shouldn't do that. Don't shake your hands around like that. That causes more anxiety and stress, and that leads to more of the behavior. And you get sort of a feedback loop where by trying to correct it, it creates more of that behavior. So to that example, we came up with a song called Quiet Hands, in which your hands quiet down, they get still. And it's a very common thing, hands shaking or moving around a lot when you're uncomfortable. And Now what you can do is, instead of confronting that student with, hey, come on, stop shaking your hands, and creating more of the feelings that will cause that, you are now just going to sing the song to them that you've taught to them, and just sing quiet hands to them. And the lesson is embedded in the lyrics, and it's a fun way to go over it. So we had to create all these songs. We, in this, should say had to, we got to, we decided to. It was a lot of fun. And one of the things we were free of in this creation process was trying to make something that was artistically significant or cool or, unique, or any of these things that we get into when we try to make our art. It didn't have to even be artistic. We weren't worried about that. We had to make a song that communicated a message that a child can appreciate. And in fact, creating complicated music was not appropriate in this case. So it allowed us to just sort of focus on all the things we had learned about making music and songs without the fear of it being cool, interesting, artistic enough, all those things we all worry about when we make music. And the songs just kind of flew right out of us. We had such great productivity during that time. We'd get together and we'd record 2 songs from scratch. We didn't even have them written yet. We'd separate, we'd finish these things. We knew what we had to do. The goals were clear. And the pressures that I often face, at least, I'm pretty sure Chris would agree, were gone. We didn't have to worry about it. And that's, again, tying into this idea of make bad music. Now, I love the songs we created. I think they're awesome. I think they're catchy. They're to the point. There's no nonsense. There's no kind of long musical interludes that maybe should be trimmed. Everything is like really well structured, in my opinion, for the job it needs to do. And it was a great experience. It was a great learning experience in that when you close off those feelings of making something that needs to be of a certain quality, you are suddenly free to make whatever you are capable of making or whatever you feel like making at the time. Make bad music. Don't be afraid of it. So that is really today's tip, today's theory or philosophy, whatever you want to call it, is to make bad music. Don't fall into the trap of everything having to be great all the time. If you find yourself making some music that you don't think is that awesome, try to just finish it. See it through. See what happens. Because if you're that far along the process, say you've been working on something for an hour and you're not feeling it anymore, for an hour you were probably into what you were doing. There was something there. There was some glimmer that maybe helped you pursue it a little bit. See if you can find that. See if you can just see it through. And if nothing else, pat yourself on the back for going through the process, going through the starting of a track, the development of a track, adding new parts and melodies, and then finishing it, arranging it, finalizing it. So important, because the next time you come up with an idea that is great, that you are really excited about, that skill set will be stronger for you. And that's an important thing, that you won't get stuck, because I'm sure you've experienced this, as I do so often, where the technical aspects get in the way of the creativity. You don't know how to do this thing or that thing. You got to look it up. You're unsure of where to go from here because you're not used to going there. How often have you found that, you've had trouble mixing, say, when that's something you didn't get to as often as you should have because you only got through the first stages and you didn't get to mixing a full track yet. And then your steam on this track you love is interrupted, your flow is hurt, and maybe your confidence is broken down enough that you give up and you don't get to finish your track. So if you're making your bad music or not afraid of making your bad music, you'll get more experience and you'll strengthen your skill set, and it'll make you a more competent producer for the times when it matters. And I guarantee you will find that a lot of the music you thought was bad is actually better than you think. I can't tell you how many times I've given up on something. And then months later, kind of rummaging through my graveyard of unfinished ideas on my computer, looking through my projects, I've come across things that I said, wow, that's pretty cool. I like that. Whatever happened to that? Why did I give up on that? And I don't know if that's a good feeling or a bad feeling, but it's something that you can take advantage of, that you can find the good in something and just go through the act of finishing it. So I leave you with that. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're enjoying this. I'm having fun kind of pouring this out of my brain and reminding myself really of some of these things that I say a lot to people, but sometimes still struggle with. It's important that you practice what you preach and that you remind yourself of the things that are important in your production process, your creative process. That's part of the reason I'm doing this podcast, is to give myself a gentle reminder and share some of the wisdom that I've picked up along the way and some of the things I've seen happen that maybe I am wishing I would have known better about in the past and not let happen. So don't be scared to make bad music. Thanks for listening. This is Brian Funk, aka AfroDJMac. Check me out at AfroDJMac.com or just go to Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, and just add AfroDJMac at the end, and you'll find me there. Take care.